Welcome to the Configuration Manager Administrator Dashboard installation video. I'm your host and creator, Matt Novich. I'm currently a Microsoft engineer, so let's get that legal stuff out of the way first. This dashboard is not supported by Microsoft support or services in any way. There is no warranties or guarantees with it, so please feel free to use this at your own leisure. And before we do anything else, please make sure to install this in a test lab before you install in your production environment. All right, to get started with the next part of this, we're going to go to the GitHub URL, which is up here at the top, and I will be providing it at the bottom of the training video. On this GitHub site, it will have all the installation files that you will need, along with all the information and screenshots of what it looks like and anything that's currently up to date. As you can see, the current date is 8/14/2020, and the last update on this file was 8/13/2020, which is yesterday. So I am making this video now to do an update to all the changes that I've made and get things going so everyone can be on the same page and not run into any issues with the older video. So to get started, we're going to scroll through to here and look at the prereqs and find all the prereqs that we're going to need to get this dashboard installed. So first thing you're going to need is the Power BI desktop. The desktop version is the one that connects to the Power BI Online. You can use that one, or you can use the Power BI reporting server one. Both links are here. It works on both of them. The choice is really up to you. Please note though, if you use the Power BI report server, there is a license for Power BI Premium or Pro, however the wording is for licensing on that, and SQL Server Enterprise Edition with software assurance. If you have an account manager with Microsoft, please reach out to them and see if you qualify for that license. You can get it free if you have software assurance, from what I've been told, but you would need to, again, check with your account manager to double check that. The next thing is you're going to need the SQL Server Administrator Dashboard SQL file. This will actually run through the entire process of installing the database that is used to run this dashboard. The database was separated from the Config Manager database. That way, when there's changes or updates to the Config Manager database, it will not impact this dashboard. It also allows us to keep the separation of supportability from Config Manager to this dashboard, so they're completely separated and isolated. And the dashboard only does a copy of data over from Config Manager. It does not do any writing. The next thing we're going to need is the PBIT file, which is the template file for the Power BI. Again, it works on both the desktop version and the report server version, so please feel free to get either one of those. The next thing we have to make sure is enabled is device guard in your hardware inventory. That is very important. It is something that you'll need in order to get all the dashboards to work correctly. So it is something you can either turn on by importing a MOF file, which I have put on the GitHub site. And all the MOF file does is just do the ingesting of the device guard components, so to speak, turning them on for the hardware inventory. You can also follow the link that is provided right here, which is a colleague of mine wrote a detailed documentation on how to manually do it by connecting to another device and turning it on there. And then the last thing you'll need is the workstation configuration items. This is a configuration baseline that will go out and check several things for BitLocker, SHA-256, and just make sure it gets all those components. This has to be downloaded and deployed to your workstations that you want to be evaluating. So in my case, I have them deployed to just BitLocker enabled devices, so my numbers look a little better. I don't have it deployed to my entire fleet. Then again, my entire fleet in my lab is super small, so there's really not a lot of data in there to begin with. But you just got to make sure when you deploy it to the correct systems that you're trying to do. All right, so the rest of this webpage goes through the exact same thing we're going to be talking about, everything that you're going to need to do to get it installed and running. We're not going to go into the Power BI on this video. That will be a separate video. Right now, I am going to solely focus on getting the prereqs done and the installation with the SQL file. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to come into Config Manager. We're going to go into Administration. I'm going to go to Client Settings. We're going to open up the default client settings. And then we're going to go to Hardware Inventory. and then we're going to go to set classes. The easiest way to check if you have device guard turned on is simply type in device guard, and you can see right there it's already turned on. And if you need to import it, you can import the device guard MOF file that I was talking about. So I've already downloaded it. It's on a location here on my C drive under the SECM folder, which I need to rename to MECM. So I will do that later. But you can import it, hit OK, open, and then obviously on mine, it's going to tell me that it's already there, so it has nothing to do. You can also hit the add button and then connect to another device and do it that way. That's going through the documentation I was talking about for my colleague. But once you get that done, that's not a big deal. It will update automatically to all the workstations that are default. If you do not want this on all of your devices, you do still have to turn on the hardware inventory, but then you can actually, or at least import it rather, in the hardware inventory, and then you can set it separately in a custom class. And then the next thing we're going to need is coming over to device collections. We're going to need a collection that has all servers in it, and then another one that has your all workstations in it. And the other one component of this we're going to need is the collection ID. So you need to make sure you know what your collection ID is. If you do not have this collection ID column, you can just right click on the empty space on the right here and just select collection ID. You can see I can turn it off and turn it right back on. Really easy, but we need this information for the SQL query we're about to run. So let's open up the SQL query, which is going to open up this big thing right here. And don't let the fact there's over 1,500 lines confuse you or scare you a little bit. All this stuff is going to be done automatically, so you do not have to worry about it. The one thing I will caution you about is if you do not have DBA rights on your database, you will need to get a SQL DBA to do this for you. If you do have a DBA rights, then you can just keep going through this whole process. And the first thing we're going to do after looking at all this file here is this line right here is going to designate where the database file is going to be, the MDF file, and then this is the log file right here, the LDF. If you do not know where your current SQL, your config manager location is, or your SQL files to begin with, you can just right click on your CM database, go to properties on it, hit files, and then we're going to scroll over to the right. You can see the path location. They're saved in these really god-awful long locations that start with C program files, and it just keeps going on and on. I shortened mine and put them to a different location. You can just see it's C SQL data log and then C SQL data data, and they're both in that location. So that is all right from this point on. And then you gotta make sure that folder actually exists. So I'm a little concerned that I did not put those locations there, but I did, so excellent. And we're gonna come back to the video here and start back on this. We're gonna scroll down. What we're looking for right now is the locations for your workstation collection ID. So the one where I told you that we need to make the all-encompassing workstation. So that will be this right here. It is NOV00017, and this is for your all collections, or sorry, all patching workstation collection. So if we come back into Config Manager, you can see workstations is NOV00017. So we're good. That one's set to go. And then if you scroll down a little bit further, you're going to find another one that is NOV00015. And if you go back into the console again, we can see 15 is my all desktops, so we're good again. And these are default in there just because it is my database, but you will have to change them to whatever yours is, or are in this case, because there's multiple. The last one is the other file. So this would be anything that you have deployed to workstations and servers. Think of that as like your Office updates, any of your Windows Defender updates, malicious software tool. Right now I have it set to SMS DM003, and if you come back into the console and you look at what that is actually the all desktop and server clients. So that's going to pull absolutely everything in that's in there, and then make sure we pull patch compliance for those machines. So we're good here. I'm leaving that one there. And the only other thing that we want to look at is if you see down here, there's a client health. And if we scroll down a little bit further, all my client health information is currently gathered off 7 days. If you need to change it per your policy, whatever your organization is, please feel free to change this number from 7 days to whatever your variable is. If it's 14 days, 30 days, whatever your config manager settings are, just change it to reflect that. That's really not that big of a deal. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is go to Edit at the top. We're going to do a Find and Replace, and then we're going to do a Quick Replace. And what we're going to want here is, you can see that you have CM NOV. So we want to replace CM underscore NOV with whatever your database is. In this case, I've already put it as my database, so I don't have to change it. But if you wanted to, you can absolutely, or you'll have to, sorry, there's no wanted to about it. You have to change it to whatever your database is, and then just hit the replace all button, and it'll replace all the instances of it. And it takes like a second to do that. So once you get that done, you should have everything else you need in here. And we're going to run it through here real quick. And let's see when it executes here. Now this will take anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes depending on your organization size. As I've added more stuff to the database with the columns, it does take a little longer to run, but as you can see, it's already done in my environment. But I've also have a relatively small environment for pulling all this data across. And there's no errors that popped up, so we're good here, because if there's any errors, we wouldn't be on the results tab, we'd be on the messages tab. You can see here there's one talking about null values. I'm okay with null values. I've actually expected that with some of them. You can see some of these lines are returning 0. That's fine also. And it goes back to the null values again. So the reason there's some null values, we're going to scroll down here. So on these are collection IDs. These are actually for the site collections that run longer than 10 to 20 seconds. I've totally expected those to be 0 in my environment. Yours may not be blank, so if your results may vary. As long as you get query executed successfully, you are good to go. There's nothing that you need to worry about at this point. Now, the good news is if your site fails to install for some reason, you can actually come down here and highlight this guy right here. And it's the very bottom of the script, and it says uninstall the CM PBI reporting database. And if you highlight this section here, hit execute, it's actually going to remove the entire database. So it is gone, it doesn't exist, and you can check, right click and hit refresh. There's no database here. So we would have to run this again. And I've had that happen where I forgot to change the database name, so it created the files, but then it didn't copy in the data over because the database had the wrong sync name. So the good news is if you mess up, it's not a big deal. Just go to the very bottom of this, highlight the uninstall, execute it, it'll reset it, and then you can start again. Because it's not touching the config manager database other than pulling data as a read, it does not impact your config manager environment. And we're going to execute this again just so we can get the database back in here. And as it's going through, what I didn't show you previously, which I need to show you this time after this is done completing, you can notice it's creating a database here for this database, the CM Power BI reporting database. But what I didn't show you is over here on the left-hand side, there's a database. If we right-click on that, hit refresh, it'll actually appear right there. So that's where, I was showing before, if you right-click refresh, it'll disappear. So it's there now, it's absolutely fine. We're good to go. And we're ready for the next step of this, which is the actual touching the Power BI template and getting that going, which will be part of the second video that I'm going to do. So thank you very much for the installation. If you have any questions, please leave a comment at the bottom of the video, and I'll take care of it from there. Thank you.